to Startup Business Q&A. Thank you very much, Facebook watchers, and thank you very much, YouTube watchers, and of course, those of you on the podcast. Great to have you here too. Look, everyone joining in, thanks so much. It is 1 week until Christmas Day 2017. There is a lot to be done, as usual, but I do think that it's an interesting time because we've got a couple of weeks left of the month, and it's interesting to always see how people are playing it out. And we said this only a week ago, you know, look at the fact that you still have some time left and it's not all over yet. It's not like it's the death of the month yet. We're actually only halfway through. So 2 weeks really till the end of the month, 1 week till Christmas. And the whole theme of today, when I put out a post a few days ago saying, if you have any questions, let's have the theme on making the most of the time we've got left ahead of the end of the year. So questions have come in. I've got 8 that we're going to work with that I've just picked that we're going to work with that have been sent through. But of course, as usual, if you have any, pop them in the comments and we'll take them from there. But what really is strange is that it's the same thing, the same kind of questions we get each week. There's an interesting switch on the questions to really reflect people's mood can change at this time of year. So where I'm going with this is it's interesting that some people view the end of the year very different to others. Some people don't really pick up on it at all. And what I mean by that is they just kind of carry on as if nothing's changing, whereas others, they get really whipped up in the hype of it all. And I think that's something you need to be thinking about as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, certainly as someone who, if you're running a business, needs to create sales as well. You need to understand that whether you view at the end of the year in a certain way or not, it is something that the majority of people do view. They simply say to themselves, look, coming up to the end of the year, I need to be buying things at the start of the month, and then towards the end of the month, it will be much more shifted towards family and things like that. So with that in mind, it's really worth thinking about what people are doing in the holidays and how that reflects your business. So that's something that will come up in some of the questions you get later on, I'm sure. So firstly, let's get into all. I'm really pleased. So many different people this week have thrown in different questions, so thanks very much. If you think of a question that either you want answered or perhaps that someone else would benefit from having answered, then do put them in. But yeah, the theme today is very much how do we make the most of the the end of the year, with about 2 weeks to go and 1 week till Christmas. And incidentally, next week, yes, there will be something going out at this time on Monday, on Christmas Day. I will probably not be live at 1 p.m. GMT, so at this time, but I have something pre-recorded I've put together that will be going out then, so you still get your dose. And that will be episode 75. So in advance, thanks very much for everyone joining into that. If you have any questions, like I say, put in the comments your question. The theme is focused on how to make the most of or leverage the end of the year. Everyone who's joined in, though, just let me know where you're from. Thumbs up if you can hear okay. But yeah, let me know where you're watching from. And let's get into the questions. So the first one here is from Joe Carter. Now, Joe's asked, Richard, since the end of the year is around the corner, I want to make the most out of the time I have to get as much as done before the year's end as possible. But I don't have much to work with to make it all happen. Resources are low, so how can I use what I readily have available to achieve maximum results in the time I have this year? Now, if resources are low, we need to attack what that really means. That may well be money, I presume it is, but it also may be time. I think the reality is there isn't masses of time of the year left. We've got a couple of weeks to go. If I had 2 weeks to the end of the year, and I was thinking, or more specifically, if I didn't have much in the way of cash resource, I'd be thinking, well, what can I do? Well, I can use my time effectively. Now, listen carefully. There is a difference between effective and efficient, okay? So something that would be efficient is, for instance, sending out an email shot to 200 people on my email list. That's very efficient because it gets to them very easily. It's not as effective as contacting each one individually. That's far less efficient because it takes a lot longer, but it's far more effective in that I will get into those individuals a lot easier. So you've got to think about that. Having said that, I think with the last 2 weeks of the year, there's still an abundance of time to do certain things. And if you want a business to get moving, you need customers. If you want customers, you have to engage with people. And if you don't feel you have much money to spend on advertising or anything like that, nothing beats connecting and entering into conversation. So this isn't efficient, but it is quite effective. And arguably it is efficient, depends how many customers you need. You know, if you're shifting 1,000 products a day, then it's not going to be very effective at all. But if you're looking for instance, consulting gigs, or you know, Carolina, you're here live. If you're looking for people for your health and wellness salon, then of course, you know, you need to make sure that you're engaging the individuals instead. That may help. I suppose what I'm talking about here is the act of engaging each day with new people. So many clients of mine have experienced great gains by simply shifting so that each day they spend about an hour and a half to 2 hours across the day on new conversations. So what they do is they say, right, I'm in this space, I will go to maybe a Facebook group, it's easily done on Facebook, and I will friend 20 people, ideally with mutual contacts and things like that, and they will friend 20 people and simply ask each one how they're doing. That's all there is to it. So 20 new people a day across 2 weeks, if you think about it, that's 280 people. Excuse me, even between now and Christmas Day, if you did 6 days worth, you're looking at 120 new people. So it's a huge amount you can engage with. Not everyone's going to buy something, but engaging the brand new conversation with 20 new people a day, you really can't miss, because half of them might not be bothered, 5 might say hey, 3 might be quite interested in you, and 2 actually convert into something. But I think that's something I could spend a lot of time doing if I don't have much money. In addition to that, I would think about, you know, you'll think about the way in which you engage with people. Conversations and messaging is one thing, but go back to your power base as well. It's a really good use of your time, is go back to the people who have bought from you before, people who you know. Just go to your Facebook Messenger, your DM Messenger, for instance, and look through all of them. And anyone you've been friends with or something for more than, say, 6 months, don't just send them a message, send them a video, a personalized video. Get your phone out, every single one, maybe do 20 a day or something like that. And I bet you get returns from that as well. So every single customer you've ever had, just something of interest like that. Go to every single one, flip out your phone and say, hey, you know, record a video. Hey, I just wanted to say hi. It's been a little while. How are you doing? I just wanted to wish you all the best for Christmas. And that can start conversations as well. It's so disruptive, as in it disrupts the mind, to do something like video or even voice on Messenger. People are nervous about doing it. They prefer to sit behind the keyboards. No problem. It works very well. But the video, wow, it really stuns people when you do that. So it's an easy way of getting some traction. And there's some ideas I would take, Joe. If resources are low as well in terms of money, why do you need money? Imagine you were never going to get any money ever again. How would you survive? You need to start working the barter economy. I strongly believe the barter economy is starting to come back much more these days. And in fact, I've used it a lot myself. Why offer someone some money when you can offer them some value in another form? And I've got plenty of people who have worked with me where we've offered each other something. Maybe I've offered him or her some time, and they've offered me some skill, and as a result, no money exchanges hands. We both feel like we won, so it makes a massive difference there. Think about that. There's a lot more you can do rather than thinking, well, I don't have money, so I can't do anything. You know, there's a lot more beyond that. So good question, Joe. Thanks everyone else joining in here. Can you just let us know where you're from? It's quite good. So Carolina, you're in here from Florida. Back in November, I was already in mindset. The year was over. With your words of wisdom, I've since changed my mindset, and 2 weeks is a long time. Yeah, it is a long time. Thanks very much as well. It's important to understand that it's based on perspective. It really depends, doesn't it? And a lot can be done in a day. I'm looking at this week thinking, right, so by Friday, there's a lot of big wins I want to have. I know that there are other people out there who go, whoa, no, that's a month's job, but some things you can just really push. And I think that's the idea. But there are other things I just think, you know, I'm in London consulting one more day on Wednesday. I've freed up some time tomorrow. I've freed up some time on Friday. These are times where I can either theorize and do new things, or I can go and create something. I'm doing some work with the old 8-step startup course to kind of resurrect it. There's some fun things there I can be doing as well. But there's a lot you can get done if you really want to make the most of it. Anyway, let's move on to the next question. So we're looking at questions relating to the end of the year, start of 2018. And Jennifer Williams has asked, how do you use the struggles of this year to slingshot you into the successes of next year? Well, my instant reaction to that is, if I had struggles, I'd say to myself, well, I survived, didn't I? I survived. And, you know, if I look at across my whole life, so many things have happened, some really tough times. And I've always said, if you say to yourself, I can handle this, and you reflect on all the things that you've got past in the past, you got over in the past, you can always say to yourself, I survived. And that's a really good perspective on things. More practically, why not write down a list, Jennifer, of, say, the top 5 or the worst 5 struggles you had, but also what one thing or what 2 things you learned from each one. And that's a good way of kind of putting into perspective that each negative or struggly based thing is actually a positive thing, because you can get something from them as well. So that's an interesting way of spinning them, I suppose. That's how I use struggles. And to be honest, I try not to dwell on them too much. I just want to move forward as much as I can. When I'm in a hard time, weirdly, that's when I invoke the kind of the lessons and the positivity from struggles in the past. But otherwise, I focus on things ahead of me. Suppose what I'm saying is, if I look at one of the biggest struggles for this year, it's probably in September when I had my operations, which is crazy. It's over 3 months ago now. And that week, I mean, they were saying, look, you're going to be in hospital at least 10 days. It's going to be a long time to recover. That week, it was driving positivity into my brain, even when I felt really awful. I reread Tim Grover's Relentless. He was the coach for Michael Jordan. I spent that whole week was about basketball, weirdly, rather than recovering from major surgery. And so I read that book. I think the first day I read nothing because I was too out of it. The second day, I think I read like 2 paragraphs, but by the end of the week, I read the whole book. It was such good juice to get me fired up again. And I drew on all of the struggles in the past I'd had, you know, tough personal times and things like that, and said, look how you've moved through it. And then from like the Wednesday, because I had the operation on the Monday, I remember I started watching lots of basketball. It was kind of keeping the theme. And I was watching, like, you know, the greatest comebacks in basketball, the greatest moves, all that kind of stuff. And what it was, because I quite like basketball, but it was more about, it wasn't just watching sport. It was about, rather than watching highlights of the game, it was watching great moments where people had overcome struggle, when maybe they were behind by 20 points and came back and won, and things like that. So it's the same kind of thing. It's about drawing the positives from them. And I think that was a really difficult time. And I even drew positive by the fact on Wednesday, even though I ended up passing out, having to have oxygen, on the Wednesday, I tried to walk and my body went into shock because it was just a bit too much too early. But even then, it was a case of, you know, look how well you did. You still managed to get out of bed. So looking at things positively it doesn't mean it's being stupid, ignoring things that are potentially negative, but it does mean being, you know, looking at things with the right perspective. You know, things could be a lot worse than now, as well. I remember saying to myself, even when I felt terrible, I remember looking around and saying to myself, I know I'm going to be out of here soon. There's a lot of people who are here before me who are going to be here after me as well. And you know, there's a lot of people in very bad condition. I was a mess, and I had lots of tubes and pipes coming out of me. But I remember thinking, you know, have a bit of perspective on how bad things really could be. Also, you're young enough and fit enough that you'll recover quickly, and thank goodness I did as well. So I think, look at what things you've learned from each one, maybe be very specific about that. And that's a good way of kind of compartmentalizing how you look at struggle. So that's a really good question, Jennifer. That's how I do it. But the overall perspective should be, when things are moving forward well, get on with it and don't worry about too much about the struggles. When you are struggling, that's a time, weirdly, to bring around the struggles and say, right, let's have a look at how well I did recently. Good question. Thumbs up if that made sense. Is that something you've done? Or put in the comments how you handle your struggles, or how you might leverage the struggles into the new year. I'd be interested in your comments, anyone who's watching at this moment. Next question is from William Simmons. Hello, William. He's asked, Richard, when is a good time to transition into preparations for the new year so that one will be ahead of the game? Obviously, it depends. If you're going to be focusing on sales or driving a campaign of some kind for the end of the year or for Christmas or something, then you need to bear that in mind. A great example of this is thinking about your Facebook ads, thinking about your promotion, thinking about your marketing. A lot of people kind of ease up over Christmas. Think very hard about what you're doing. The majority of internet usage is mobile, so on people's mobiles, not a desktop or a laptop. In addition to that, people are checking their phones all the time, is what we say. Yes, but also people are, majority of the time, they are getting an earlier night because they have to get up for work. And when they're at work, they are in the main not on their phone. I know some of you do disagree, you're like, no, I'm on my phone all the time. But in the main, you're doing a job. Over Christmas, it completely flips. You stay up later because you're watching the Bond film, or you're eating late, or you're just chilling out. And why go to bed early because it's your holiday? Also, you're on the phone more. Okay, if people are on the phone a lot more, of course they are. They're sharing more photos about what they did. They want to keep up with all their friends. It's weird that the time of family in 2017 may well be physically together, but there's still a lot of there's more use of phones these days. So it draws in the outside too. So be on your A game with your marketing and your engagement over Christmas, if that's the time, if you're trying to leverage sales, because in fact, you're going to get more eyeballs and attention. Just be careful that you're not overdoing the whole commercial message when you've got people trying to have a nice, relaxing time. But they are going to be on their mobile, and arguably more people will be looking at their phones more of the day across Christmas, because they're not in their place of work. So that's an interesting insight to think about. All right, but the question here, that it depends, therefore, is the answer. But when's a good time to transition into preparations? Carolina here was doing it back in November. I look at the year as a whole, and I feel kind of, where am I in it generally? And I think coming out of October into November, I was like, wait, it's the 2 months left kind of mark now. So November was a massive month because I had a huge contract I was working on, and it was very consuming. So I had to really hustle to make sure all my moving parts were still moving. But then looking through kind of the woods of November, I was looking through at December thinking, really, you've only got a couple of weeks of people being in their offices, so that affects one of my businesses. But also you need to be thinking about how Christmas looks. And I think it's intelligent to look at Christmas and New Year's back before the start of December, because you need to prep for what you're going to do. Maybe content's got to change, you've got to build that and things like that. But I think to be ahead of the game, you don't have to do more. Listen carefully, you don't have to do more to be ahead of the game. You have to be consistent. You have to do the same. The reason why is you can be ahead of the game by doing more than them, or you can be ahead of the game by them doing less than you, right? And that's probably what will happen over the Christmas period. If you don't want to bank on that, then do more, and you'll widen that gulf even more. So people who really get ahead, it's like in recessions. They push themselves and they do even more. They buy businesses, they grow, whilst people are kind of downsizing and tightening their belts. And that widens the gulf wider still. But I think that you need to think about that. Looking at the Christmas period, really from now, people are easing up. It's like over the summer, people ease up, they slow down a bit. There's your opportunity to get ahead of the game, whatever that might look like. And I remember last year, I was building a sales team selling a certain product for me. It might have been the year before. I think it was last year. And I remember well that it was around Christmas Day, Boxing Day, and then New Year's as well. There were people messaging me saying, I've just closed this guy. This has just happened. It's like, wow. That's how you really get ahead. That's how it felt so good, because people were really pushing themselves even at that time of year. It may have also had something to do with the fact that I had a very generous commission scheme I was offering people back then as well. But yeah, it's important to have that perspective. People will slow down, so there's your opportunity to naturally speed up, I suppose, just by doing what you've been doing all along. But if you step up a level, then it gets serious. Okay, so think about that. Next question, Aziz Selman. I think you're over in Australia, Aziz. So if you are, so thanks so much for sending this through. What are some methodologies or strategies we can incorporate from other prominent leaders' lives that we could possibly focus our energies on for the upcoming year? So 3 prominent leaders and things they've done that we can use for New Year. So this could, you know, if you do, by the way, everyone give me a thumbs up if you do New Year's resolutions. I'm interested if you do or not. Because whenever I have this idea like pops into my head of, oh, that would be a really good New Year's resolution, it's like, so just do it now then. That's an interesting way of looking at things. So I'm not trying to call anyone out. It's interesting if people have them or not. I don't think it's a bad thing per se to have a New Year's resolution. And the reason why is because I think if there is a natural, or rather there's a cultural watershed on January 1st, right? So in 2 weeks from now, January 1st, there's a natural feeling of you know, refreshing and starting over and things like that. That's just the calendar. We're no more significant a position around the sun than we will be 3 days later or 3 days before. But that's just cultural. That's what we've created for ourselves. So if it helps you feel rejuvenated, well then fine. And you know, it's a bit of an awakening for many people and things like that. What I'm really interested in is always, as I say, you know, midway through June on a Tuesday afternoon, are you still doing a resolution then? And do resolutions because they're things that you want to do rather than you feel you should do, because ultimately you're not going to probably follow through on them. But I suppose the point I was going to make was I don't do New Year's resolutions personally. My view is if I have something I need to be doing, I need to probably get on and do it. If coincidentally I had something I want to do and I started doing it in January because that's when I thought of it, well then fine. But I don't hoard things I need to improve about myself until January, because if I need to improve them, I'm deferring to a calendar rather than to my needs. And I think a personal view is that maybe that's not the best way of doing it. But anyway, to the question, there is a reason why I brought in New Year's resolutions. It's because there's some strategies I think some leaders do have that are worth incorporating. Let's look at some of the top guys then. If you look at Bill Gates, I think Mark Zuckerberg does this as well. Bill Gates, classically, I think it's 2 weeks a year, he goes off-grid completely. I'm pretty sure Mark Zuckerberg does this for a week as well. And I did this year, and I'm kind of doing a bit of this each year. Kind of did it twice this year, really. But I did it in properly this year. And the idea is going off-grid completely for a set amount of time to just force yourself to reflect and think on things. And when you relax and you think on things, you see things higher. When I worked my face off and I was doing 80-hour weeks in the city, I didn't have, my mind could not think laterally. It could not think creatively because it didn't have that space. I was all hustle for like a year, I remember, of non-stop focus on work. So it was, I know this because when I stopped that job and I started building my own world, I had a lot more time because I wasn't so pressured on myself to do certain things, that suddenly I felt my mind being more creative and coming up with ideas and things. And it was very liberating. I remember thinking, wow, there's so much capability our brains have, but we don't allow that in because we're constantly pushing and working. If you just stop for a moment, or at least build into your day an opportunity to be creative and think, it really helps. I love the idea of a retreat. It's not because I'm not going to do any work. I'm not going to sit around playing on on computer games or something. But what I do is just kind of think, or maybe read, be very selective about what books I'm going to read, even be calculated about what things I would like to think about as well. So I almost pack my mental suitcase with, here are 3 things I'm going to think about. Maybe that's something you could do over Christmas. Like, so if it may be a break from my job in some respects, if I'm going to think about stuff, even if it's for 10 minutes across the Christmas period, what 3 things could I really think about? What would be worth putting some mental resource into, because I wouldn't be doing other things necessarily. And, back in April, I was in California. I did a lot of kind of touring around good food and wine, and visited a vineyard that I'd put a bit of money into. They're building a new style of generating wine. I also went up into, I went completely off grid, so up into the hills in Sonoma, where you can't get mobile reception or anything like that for a couple of days, and just read and sat, and I was with a couple of members of family, so we just talked a lot and walked and things like that, and it was spectacular views and sunshine and things like that. And so it's very good for the soul, but it's also good to kind of have a bit of time, and you kind of zoom out a bit and you start thinking about things differently. So I think it's worth doing that. That's one thing I would suggest, that a strategy or method, whatever you want to call it, is that you would be well placed to do. Another one, I think, so that's Bill Gates. If you look at Warren Buffett's view on things is very much the long game. So I think it would be worth thinking to yourself about what things you want to put into the long game box. If you take an example of something that's blown up in the last few months, something like Bitcoin, investing in Bitcoin arguably is a long game thing, but also a short term thing. So some investors will have got in early or even got in today, but they're deciding to be there long term. Whereas other people are trading on hype, because there are plenty of people, no one can disagree with this, is a fact. Plenty of people are buying Bitcoin and driving the price up, or at least contributing to it going up because of hype. So if that's the case, day traders will be leveraging that volatility. But I think there's value in looking at the long term and thinking to yourself, rather than, what do I want to achieve this year? It's something like, what do I want to be remembered for? What do I want my legacy to look like? And as a result, what should I be doing this year to contribute towards that? And that's that long term. That might be 10, 15, 20, 40 years, something like that. Real long term stuff. I think it's said a lot by many people. Think about, in however many years it is, in whatever technology they're using, your grandchildren or your great grandchildren, and they're huddled around whatever kind of hologram tech that runs with YouTube. Then maybe we don't have YouTube, who knows? And they're watching their great grandfather, in my case, or something like this, and they're like, oh, they can see the people from the past. Would you be proud of what you're showing them if there are lessons or things you could pass on? It's one of the reasons why I love doing the Q&A. I'm very thankful that people are perpetuating by asking great questions, but also I say to myself, this hopefully is wisdom that is being passed on, that even when I'm gone, my grandchildren and so on will be able to look at it and go, hopefully think I'm a decent bloke, but also to think, actually, there's some great ideas there. I can see why he was successful in building businesses and helping others, because he's got some ideas that we could try, and who knows, it might be useful for them. But looking at things very long term, maybe you want to write a book, or maybe you should start a blog, whatever it is. I think getting that kind of that view of there's no end in 6 weeks time or something. It's just, let's start something that's going to go on forever. How many episodes of Startup Business Q&A are there going to be? There's a good question. Why wouldn't it just go on? Why not? This is episode 74. I'm really excited for some reason next week about 75, even though it's going to be probably pre-recorded. But I do feel that there's no reason to stop it. There's only reason to continue it. I think even if I generated no direct revenue from this or anything like that, that's such a short-term view of things, that what's far better is creating this archive of wonderful moments with great questions from all of you, and then passing that on. So that's the thing I would think about, and that's Warren Buffett's long view of things. So he doesn't invest in Bitcoin, in my understanding, but he invests in products or companies or industries rather that are going to be very long term, because that's how he ultimately wins, by hedging from for 15 years or something like that. And let's look at Jeff Bezos. I think more practically for your business, a really good tip is to not pay yourself too much. I was telling someone this on Wednesday last week. I was with a client, and I told them one of the best pieces of advice, because they were asking me for advice on, I think we'd finished a training session, they were asking me for advice on how they should spend their commission. And I remember saying, one of the best things I've ever done is kept myself as broke as possible. So even with money coming in, and houses and cars and the family being looked after and holidays and things like that, personally, I keep my current, or in the States, your checking account, I keep that as empty as possible. All money goes out and invest in stuff and buy great things and whatever it might be, but I try and keep myself broke, because that's where the hunger really is derived from. If you're too comfortable, it's very difficult to push yourself. And I quite like the idea of feeling broke, because it does give you that real need to get out of bed. So there are other things that motivate me as well, but that tends to work quite well. And if you look at Jeff Bezos, I think it was last year, I mean, the guy's worth $100 billion. However, if Amazon closed today, if something terrible happened to it and it all closed down and all of his stock was wiped out, you know, he paid himself last year, I think it was $82,000. $82,000 for the year was his salary. Okay, that's Jeff Bezos, who's worth 100 billion. So his take home is so small. I think it's a small gesture. I think the top person in his company, although they probably got 1.2, I think it's 1.2 million quid of stock, is a person who runs Amazon Web Services, and I think that person gets something like $130,000. So it's not vast amounts of money. And if you convert to pounds, you know, $80,000 is odd, or is like £60,000, which is a moderately all right wage here in the UK. It's a decent wage here in the UK. But for the richest guy in the world, it's not much. So am I saying don't pay yourself? No, I'm saying maybe invest in yourself. I think you should reinvest massively into your businesses, but pay yourself what you need rather than what you want. If you're trying to draw out all of your business's capital so you can look like a baller, you know, and buy a BMW or a bling watch or something like that. I mean, this watch is just a cheap watch because I've got a very nice watch as well, but that was something that was bought for me. This watch is a cheap one because I'd rather put my money in things that are a little bit long term. It's my decision. That you may have a different view on it, but my strong feeling is that you really win by keeping yourself fairly broke and then reinvesting the money into the business. So there's some three ideas as it's from some prominent leaders that you might want to try out. Thanks for that. Hopefully that makes sense. Anthony Ogley has asked, as a starter, what 3 things would you prioritize? It doesn't change for the start of the new year, really. I think it would be the same things. Customers, absolutely, customers is your priority. The second thing is marketing, which of course is how you leverage your marketing to get your customers. And the third thing is probably your MVP, your minimum viable product. Have something, service or product or otherwise, that you can get out there so that people can actually see what you're doing and start giving you some kind of feedback from the trenches. It's so essential to do that, because if you have those 3 things, if you have the first 2 things, if you're trying to get customers and you're doing great marketing but you don't have a product to offer them, they might get excited, but then that momentum hits a brick wall because no one's buying anything then sampling the service. So get the MVP out there as well. But I think without a question, by a light year, it's getting customers. And at the top of the session, I talked about engaging or connecting with 20 new people a day. That doesn't avoid any need for marketing, but it's a hell of a great way of kind of speeding things up. Marketing sometimes can take time, but I think the 2 go hand in hand, really. They're the things I would prioritize without a shadow of doubt. However, what I said earlier as well stands about the holidays. In terms of if you're starting out your business now, think about, to make it more topical, think about the fact that people, as of towards the mid-late end of this week, they're going to stop working, and probably for about a week or so, people are going to be at home. They're going to be on their phones a lot more. So if you're doing your advertising or if you're doing your marketing, this is the time when you're going to get greater attention. But understand the caveat: more people will be looking at their mobiles over the holidays. However, they're looking at it with a particular point of view, a particular mind. You mustn't think about people looking at your marketing on any platform as just people, just demographics. No, there is a psychology in there as well. When someone is on holiday or on Christmas Day and they're looking at their mobile, which they'll be doing all day long as well, what they're going to be doing is looking at with a certain point of view. They're going to be feeling good about stuff, probably. They'll be wanting to see what people got as presents, okay? They'll be wanting good feeling, right? When it's the new year as well, there's a lot of good feelings. You need to think, if you're going to do your marketing right, think about how you're going to not use that sounds really Machiavellian, but how you're going to kind of complement that feeling that people have. Do you see what I mean? If you look at 3 weeks into January, people are not in the same mood as they are around Christmas at the start of the year. I think it's something like the first week of February or third week of January, I think, is like the most highest suicide rate, because everyone's got the whole year ahead of them. Many people get a bit down in the mouth about it. So those same people are on their mobiles, but their view of things is different. So that's something to really think about, is what are people's minds going to be going through on the build up to Christmas this week. Think about Black Friday recently, how that really got people whipped up. That was the fear of missing out. Okay, think about Christmas now. It's about coming together. People aren't in the buying space, in the buying mindset from next week. So this week it's frenzied buying. Next week, no, it's about family. People have bought their things, but then it's the sales and things like that. And some people might be quite proactive, but really across Christmas Day and Boxing Day, that's not entirely on people's minds. It's probably hanging out and being with family and feeling good. So test it, but that's something to think about. Let's do a couple more. So Fahad Mohammed has asked, how do you know which opportunities to select and which opportunities to turn down for a startup or a seasoned entrepreneur? How do you know what opportunity? If there was a way in which you'd know what opportunities to select and go with, or which ones to turn down, we'd all be millionaires. But there isn't a way. One of the most famous examples, if you read Originals by Professor Adam Grant from Wharton, he explains this in depth really well and why this happened. But the short version is the Segway, which you may have heard of, the it's like two wheels, and you lean forward, and you see it, I think on Santa Monica, don't they have police guys on it or something like that? So basically the Segway is this kind of motorized human movement device, if you like. And whenever it came out, it was on 90s or something, John Doerr, the venture capitalist, put $1 billion in it. Steve Jobs backed it. Jeff Bezos backed it as well. So you couldn't get greater good feeling about this kind of thing and better backing. They thought, this is the future, that's it, it's all over, this is how people are going to walk and move around now on this Segway, and it never happened. So not everyone gets it right. Okay, so you got to understand that you'll never know for sure. What do I really do when I come to invest? If I put money into business, or if I decide to put time into a business, when I invest in someone or an opportunity, if I start with investing in a company, it always comes down to the same things. Do I like the person? Do I buy into the person? If they're an idiot, as in if I don't like them, I'm not going to invest in them, because I need to get on. I need to have some kind of, I have to have a connection. I have to believe in the person first. By a million miles, it's the person first. Then it's the idea, which is why I've been involved in quite a diverse range of things. I've gone from Forex trading to event design to consulting to personal training, like all over that. And so it's not the industry as such, it is the person. Then it's my gut reaction. Does it just feel like something I want to invest in? Because even people I get on with, I don't necessarily put money into because I don't believe in them or what they're doing. And then the third thing really is, do I have some moderate awareness at the very least of what it is they're doing? Because if I don't understand what they're doing, I am throwing emotion and possibly the fear of missing out as the reasons why I should invest. And you need to be a little bit more calculated than that. So that's kind of what I do. That's how I find out. It should be probably your space, something you know about. I mean, if I look at 2018, moving into the new year, if some of you are out there thinking, I'm going to start a new business, I want to do this thing, I want to launch something of my own, then I can leave my job, or whatever your motivation is, don't think, but do you know what? Bitcoin's blowing up, so I'm just going to go and do that, and I need to understand it all, and I'm going to try and mine Bitcoin, and I don't know what it is, but that's where lots of people make money. That's a mistake. It makes sense to think about what you can do well first and leverage that, because you'll probably make far more money doing something you're good at and understand, and Monetize You, the course, is exactly how to do that. So check out therichardmoore.com and explain how that works. But I do think that it's a worry. I've seen this. It was on Instagram recently. Someone was sharing that they're making money on Bitcoin, no problem at all. And they've got their crew. They've got like a gang of people, and they're signing them up to their team to kind of make money on Bitcoin or mine it or whatever. And they were showing their gains with a Z that day and like the percentages. And it's like, but if you look And I'm, you know, there's lots of hashtag hustle and how much hard work they put in. But if you look at the end of their day, it's like we're all making profit, and it's like, but it's $16. Yes, I applaud. Well done. You'd made it off your own back. You generated this income, but $16, you know, for all that work. And unless there's some insane trajectory you're taking that's going to convert 16 to 16,000, what's the point unless you're desperately interested in Bitcoin, in which case where you bothered so much about the profits there. So I was perplexed because I think that some people are kind of they can't really see the wood for the trees sometimes, and they're focused maybe on jumping on this bandwagon. So I'm not calling out Bitcoin because I think there's a lot of interesting facets to it, but I just think what I'm calling out is people who are saying, I'm going to build a business, I'm going to invest in myself, I'm going to go and make something of my own, and they make probably the wrong thing. They make something that everyone else or other people are doing well in, and they try and force themselves to get something out of that. Far better to say, well, what is it I'm really good at, and leverage that instead, because you already know that. And again, it feels like I'm promoting here, but it kind of am, I suppose. So for Monetize You, the course, the whole point is it shows you how to leverage stuff you already know really well. So why bother learning a whole new industry and how to leverage that when you can already have the knowledge and know how to leverage it? So it's far more effective that way around. I just think that's important in terms of opportunities. And to kind of back to this question from Fahad, it's essential that you understand a little bit about what it is you're going to invest in, what opportunities you want to take. If it's like, oh, but everyone's making loads of money, I should jump on it, but you don't understand it, don't do it. It's just not worth it. There will be more opportunities, and you will miss other opportunities in the past. I was born in 1980, so I grew up with the internet. Do I wish at the turn of the century I'd started Startup Business Q&A on YouTube? Of course I bloody did, rather than 2016. However, we're here now, and so, you know, you've got to move on. But I do think, you know, people are jumping on after the shiny object syndrome. They've got to be careful there, okay? So thumbs up if that makes sense, if you feel the same. If you don't, happy to receive comments on that. I don't mind at all, but that's my view on it. Sarah Ann Anderegg has asked, Richard, what are some ways to prepare financially for a new year ahead, both personally and business-wise? I think one thing that jumped in my head as I was reading that is that there was someone I remember, it must have been a couple of years ago, and he was going to spend something like $3,000 or $4,000 on a mastermind retreat, right? Now, great, no problem at all. Mastermind retreats, what a good idea, because you can be with a load of people who are going to be valuable and things like that. But he was basically bringing it up, I remember, because he wanted validation over the decision to go. He was unsure, right? But what's worse is when I asked him why he thought he was unsure, he was like, well, it's a lot of money. Tell me more about this. Well, it's a lot of money in that it's more money than I have. And in fact, he asked me for some money. He was asking other people as well. And I said, if you really desperately wanted to go, you'd go find this money. But in addition, I understand you feel you're investing in this because that will be investing in your business as well. But let's look at this as a business owner, right? As a business owner, that's very poor judgment. It would be to spend all, so I suppose what I'm saying here is, imagine you're CEO of a $2 million business and an opportunity comes up that takes more than all of the capital the business has. This is a business that has staff, has payroll, has expenses, has inventory, and it has its capital. Let's say it has $300,000 in reserve. Okay, so you got picturing running this business. You turn up and every morning, car park's full of workers. You've got $300,000 of cash in reserve. You spend it all, and maybe some more in the form of a loan, on an opportunity. well, that opportunity better work, right? It better work. It must be so clearly mapped back to the direct success of your company that it's a no-brainer. Because otherwise, what you're doing is so reckless as a business leader, because you've got all these people's livelihoods, you're gambling with their company. It is bordering on insanity to take all that money and throw it all on one opportunity. Now, I've made it quite extreme, but if you zoom in and imagine, instead of being CEO of a big company, you are you running your life. Instead of having $300,000, you've got $3,000. How is it any different? Would you spend all of your money on one thing that might help improve you? Well, you would if you fall for the hype and the marketing, or you would if it's definitely a product or service that you know you can leverage. It better be the second, because if it's the first, you're just getting sold on the hype. So you need to be very careful about that. And I think one way to prepare yourself financially for the future and for the year ahead, Sarah, is to think to yourself, imagine running my personal life like a business. How's my personal business accounts doing? Am I throwing it all on stuff that just doesn't make sense? Am I spending it all or taking huge gambles with the personal money? Imagine there was a payroll and people who I had responsibility to. I wouldn't be acting like this. And it's interesting, when you apply that mindset to your personal finances, suddenly you get a little bit more careful with what you're doing. I think also, for the new year ahead, if you imagine the beginning of 2008, I can remember it well because I was 27 at the time. I imagine 2008, as it's literally 10 years ago now, as we ticked into 2008, the feeling of invincibility people had with finance was crazy. I remember 2007, I bought a property then, so I was 27 years old, I bought a flat, and the banks were throwing money at me. They were saying, like, it was almost like, how much do you want, and it was like, but the repayments would be ridiculous, but they were like, yes, fine. Like, they were saying things like 6.5 times your income. It was absurd. So my wife was a lawyer, so combined it was been absurd. And I think no one, well, apart from very few people, if you watch The Big Short, very few people thought that by October 2008, the economic world would be on its knees. And I think, I'm not saying that that's going to happen in 2018, but you don't know. And if you think about, the 90s, there was a recession. The 80s, so 87, so 30 years ago, there was a recession in 1987 as well. Is there going to be one this year? Who knows? We could be. A lot of people think we're due. So going into the year thinking, it's very difficult. It's a bit of a dichotomy. I'm going to invest in myself. I'm going to stay broke, in that I'm going to keep myself hungry. I'm going to not make absurd gambles, imagining like I have responsibility to run a business. I wouldn't do that with the business's money, so why would I do it with my personal one? But as an additional thing here is, think about, if there was a massive recession, how much money have you got? How much have you got in reserve? If you're employed and you lost your job, what would that mean? Okay. Where can you get money from? Are you building skills that are going to help you if things, go bad? If you've invested all of your money, I've read and seen people investing, they're drawing money out against credit cards to invest into cryptocurrency because of the hype of it. I feel you got to be careful, make sure you know what you're doing, although not everyone does, of course. What would happen if it dropped through the floor and you lost your investment then? Okay, so then it's same with houses, same with anything. It's not just Bitcoin. I'm not picking on it, but the point is that you need to be ready. So if there was a recession, what would you do? How are you equipped? If you I say this all the time to my clients, if you lost your best client, or in fact earlier this year it's happened to one of my clients, for reasons out of his control, the stars aligned and 3 of his clients had to quit. Nothing to do with him. He was offering a great service. They were gutted. It was a money thing. And then there was one of them was moving, and then something else as well. 3 of them left in the same week. And it was like, wow, that hurt. I just lost, whatever it was, 1,500 quid in a week, in a month I would normally be paid or something. And for him, that was a lot. And so So what are you going to do? How can you cover the downside? That's Richard Branson. So make sure you always cover the downside. And I feel it's important. If it all went wrong now, I mean, look, we're living in a really good time. But if you lived in a bad time now, what would happen then? How would you set yourself up for the future? It's so nice to see people still joining in. Gia Portia, I have not seen you for some time. I hope you're well. Thanks so much for joining in. Umar, thanks very much for hopping on as well. Let's look at one more question. Unless anyone has any questions here, we're answering questions on how to prepare for the year ahead. Last one here from Imain Al Ghul, I think all the way from Israel. You've asked, what are the tools that helped you stay on track this 2017 regarding productivity and focusing your work? There are two things that spring to mind here. The first one is the when to do list concept. Those that have tried it, I don't know if you have or not. Can you all give me an angry face if you haven't tried this yet? The when to do list, and give me a heart if you have tried it. The when to do list is evolving from a to do list, which is just a list of stuff you got to do today, to when to do. So at 10:30, I'm doing X. At 10:45, I'm doing Y. At 11:08, I'm doing Z. And what it is it pushes you to, you're watching the clock saying, I've got to get this thing done. I've got 6 minutes remaining before I'm on to the next task. So it's like a little challenge. Your productivity goes crazy. I've done like four times what I would normally do in a day with the when to do list. So I strongly suggest you try it out. So that's one of the things that's been very productive in the year. The other thing I'd say, so what are the tools? I can call them a tool. I think the other thing I found has really helped is my team. I'm not going to go all teary-eyed, but without them, I wouldn't be able to do nearly as much as I could. There's only so much one man can do, and no matter how much hustle you've got, and at times I have put aside sleep or eating or anything because certain things needed to be done. But with a team behind you, I feel like that's the way you scale. I strongly urge you, if you are a lone wolf, a solopreneur, to work on building a team around you. What elements of your world could be done either by a VA or could be done better by someone who's talented in that space? My guy who runs, John, if you're watching, my guy who does mobile ad ops is phenomenal. By comparison to me, is way better, I think. And so having him in place doing this instead of me is far more effective. The guy who, so Ben, who looks after web development, knows his stuff and understands how to build that so much more than me. It's insane to not have that guy on board. So for some, you pay them. For some, it's not necessary. Like I said earlier, have the barter economy. How about if I offer you this and you provide that skill, and then it works better that way? So I just think building a team, if you're not doing it yet, make that one of the things you start doing now into 2018, because that's one of the things that's really made a difference. Not just 2017, but more so. I think if I look at the team, it's moved from having a sales team to having a sales team, yeah, but also having people who do particular things, like a guy, Willie, over in Germany, who focused purely on working with me on Twitter, nothing else. Sal over in Baltimore, was it? Maryland, rather. So Sal working with me on YouTube, literally one guy, great talent, all in on that. Okay, so have a different person for each thing. It's really effective. Zev, who provided graphics for me, he's far more talented. He's got the kit, so why not make use of him as well? And these are touch points in this whole ecosystem that really make a difference. Jesper, thanks so much for your message. That's really kind. I hope that's been useful. Look, thanks so much for everyone who sent questions in. So Joe, Jennifer, William, Aziz, Anthony, Farhad, Sarah, and Imain, all amazing to have those through. Thank you very much. You've got 1 week left till Christmas. You've got 2 weeks left till the new year. I think there's some, just because of your questions, there's been some really great tips in there that we've been able to leverage. This week, there's a lot that can be done. Next week, I'll be back and I will be providing another, it won't be a Q&A as such, but it'll be a session for you on Monday for some continuity, and there'll be a New Year's one as well. But I do think that there's so much that can be done. If you look back through this session alone, we've been going for a good hour. what was clear is that if you understand what people are doing, as in up here, across the next 2 weeks, you can still do great things with your business. And if you don't have money, there are plenty of alternatives as well. So that's one way of doing it. But look, it's been a real pleasure. So many of you jumped in here. It really means a lot to me. Thanks very much. And thumbs up if it's all been useful. If you've been upset by it and it's rubbish and you're never going to watch it again, at the very least, put in a comment and let me know why. But hopefully that's not the case. But thanks so much for being Richard Moore. This is episode 74 now, so great fun, and I'll see you next week for 75. In the meantime, stay in touch. Any other questions, of course, if you're watching this on the replay or listening on podcast, stick them in and I'll answer those retrospectively. But have a great day. Thanks so much, and have a massive week. Take care.